Okay, and we'll go ahead and start out with the volatile data, since we know we want to get at that first, if at all possible, right? Why do we want it first, again?
Fast moving.
Because it'll disappear, right? If you lose power, it's no longer going to be there. And there will be no gone forever as far as that's concerned, right? And there's going to be, during an investigation, there could be some very critical information. So you definitely want to go after this as quickly as possible. As I mentioned before, historically there has been a mentality of pull the plug first. And the plug meaning not the Cat5 cable, but the actual power, right? They're like, oh, it's malware, it's doing something horrible, so let's just kill the whole thing. But you cannot pull if it has... There's malware out there now, if you've not heard, that resides strictly in memory. It does not have to sit on your drive at all. They can inject it straight into your memory, so you will never find that again if you just unplug it, right? So that's the sort of thing you're trying to capture. You're trying to capture the current conditions within your memory, meaning what processes were you running, what connections were you having. So you want to make sure you take care of that volatile data first, if at all possible. And if it is in the ranking of importance, if you will, go ahead and go for the volatile data first to make sure that you can get it. You can collect it either remotely or on-site, of course. But remotely, you may have the challenges of trying to pull back 8 or 16 gigabytes of RAM across what kind of network connection might you have. You may have to ask somebody to punch a hole in their firewall when you're that far away. So sometimes the answer to that is to have somebody on site there. You either have them send them some sort of package that has instructions on how to do it, or you hope somebody there on site is capable of pulling that memory for you. And depending on the number of responders and the number of systems required. But that, like I said, if you really need that volatile memory, and considering the size of it, right, it's no longer 4 megs of RAM or even 4 gigs of RAM. You're talking 8, 16, and more so on servers have 32, 64, and more gigabytes of RAM. So you're talking about a significant amount of pull, especially across the network. So might be a better idea to have somebody there on site do it. Okay. So this is the RAM, the random access memory, which is interesting because much of memory now is pretty random. It's not like tape when it had to be sequential and you couldn't get access to it. But there's a ton of information that you'll be pulling if you do get the RAM, if you're able to do so. In addition to the things I mentioned already, there are the open files and also logged on users, who's actually on it, which account, right? It says users, but actually it's what account, because sometimes it's a service account that's doing something if it's been set up to do a cron job or some sort of previously scheduled task. You find out, hey, there's a cron job or a scheduled task that none of our administrators set up, but it doesn't look like a regular user, it just looks like a service account that did it. So that's the kind of stuff you're also looking for when you look at this. Excuse me.
Volatile memory on a VM, a snapshot would be sufficient?
That's my understanding as well, but since volatility can pull memory right off of, if you've never heard, there's a tool called Volatility, and I'm sure other things do it too, but Volatility definitely can pull memory off of a virtual machine. So if you're able to do that, it'd probably be recommended to go ahead and capture that as well. And that way, if for some reason something goes wrong with your snapshot, because after all, a snapshot is just a copy onto your drive, something happens to your drive or that part of it, then having the actual stuff pulled onto Volatility might be a good idea. And then this here, last statement on the bottom, when connecting a device to collect RAM, document what the system does upon connection. This has to deal with possible anti-forensic measures that are part of, say, malware that pays attention to maybe a USB connection, whatever way you're connecting to it. Since that's a common way to gather the information, is either a USB key or a USB drive with something, or maybe even it may even pay attention to putting a disk into the ROM drive. And all of a sudden, you see the hard drive light going like crazy. Well, it might be erasing itself, or it might go as far as being destructive, and it might start doing other things. There's been cases where the anti-forensic software, or malware, I guess, actually went and destroyed the hard drive, because it was like, oh yeah, well, you're not going to get anything on me because I'm going to just wipe just about everything off I can, type of thing. And that's truly where you want to yank that cord in a hurry, if at all possible, to maintain the integrity of whatever's left on the drive. So remote collection requirements, right? You have to get authorization. That seems like a really common thing, but sometimes people try to do things across the network that they forget to ask permission for, and you can get in trouble for that sort of thing, especially when the stakeholder is, perhaps around the world and it's an international thing. You don't want to be in trouble for stealing something internationally, I'm sure. Right, and then it's the same thing when I mentioned before. You may have to ask somebody to punch a hole through a firewall, and or if they have a proxy or some other device that will prevent you from actually getting access internally to that system. And same thing holds true for remote, right? You got to have the appropriate operating system, even though you're however many hundreds or thousands of miles away. You may forget, gee, I'm trying to collect this thing on a Windows machine and I forgot that it's a Linux or an Apple machine. So you want to make sure you have that stuff worked out well in advance for remote collection. Your access method sometimes can limit or give you more abilities, right? Are you connecting through a remote desktop? You have a GUI, but you can only do so much through that, right? You can't access some of the things through a remote desktop that you can through SSH, through Secure Shell, and other methods of connecting. And then it all depends on what tools that responders got access to. Can also help or hamper the investigation collection piece. Administrative credentials. This is where when you do something remotely, a lot of times systems are set up in such a way that you have to have that administrator or root account in order to access the full extent of what's available. So you'll want to work that ahead of time so you have the appropriate credentials at the right level that you need. Because you don't want to sit there and do something to try to play with escalate your own privileges. So make sure you get the right ones to begin with. And then the local access collections, right? Sometimes we forget if they use terminals and you need to access a server, you may need to bring a keyboard and a monitor to be able to look at what you're dealing with, right? And then if these systems are in restricted areas for the federal government, is it a classified area? Is it a sensitive compartmented information facility or a SCIF that you're going to? Because you have to pass your clearances. You have to get permission to go there. There's a lot of times there's a visitor request that you have to send forward in addition to your clearance information. And there's defense industrial-based companies, right? The companies that support the Department of Defense, like excuse me, the Lockheeds and the Raytheons and those companies like that have the same sort of requirements, even though they're not technically government. They work with government and they have SCI facilities at their buildings. So when you're dealing with that sort of thing, be sure you understand that for showing up on a local site, that you have all your visitor stuff. If you need badges, get those badges done early. All that stuff. Because again, you're trying to get there and you're trying to deal with an incident in an expedient way as possible. So all that stuff, right? Storage media to attach, right? You got to make sure you got the right cables and make sure that you have enough room on the data. So imaging RAM, you can do this with FTK Imager. This just happens to be an example. I don't know if you can see this very well, but this is the verified drive image, and that's where it does the hashing. It doesn't happen to have that option. It's subdued here, but there's the capture memory, and then you go ahead and you put the information on naming it, and where you want it to go. Pretty straightforward. Any questions? So trusted tools, this is kind of a side note, but sometimes when a system has been compromised and you want to go into it and you're not doing the full disk image necessarily, and you're just gathering certain pieces of information, you might be tempted, maybe not you, but the forensic team person might be tempted to use some tools that are native or already on the machine. This is not recommended. There's some times where a malicious actor will replace a particular file that has a payload or some shellcode in it that just calls back. You're able to do this with some of the tools that are available out there today, where you just take a file and you tell it to put this shellcode into the file, and when it executes, everything executes about that same file the same way, like calculator or something like that. Notepad will run as normal, but it will also inject this shellcode into memory and run and make a connection back if it's able to do so. So we're talking about tainted tools, right, versus trusted tools. So this doesn't happen all the time, and it doesn't apply to every situation. But if you're dealing with a host that has been compromised and you're only grabbing certain pieces, and you're like, oh, it's not, or maybe it's not even compromised as much as maybe something happened on it. They staged something. They put something there, or it's a key piece of evidence you need to go pull. You may not want to use the software that's already installed on that. If you can get your own clean, verified version of that software, you would be better off, just in case. So you're not propagating any malware. You're not causing any more problems than absolutely necessary. Right, so they'll replace it with their own version. Sometimes that thing connects back. Sometimes it does all kinds of other things. So I think connecting out would be relatively benign compared to trying to delete the entire hard drive or something like that. The command line tools. These are the less thought of as forensic tools. But taking the W, that'll list out who's logged in. And you use the redirection, that's the less than or greater than, whichever way you want to put that, and you put that into a text file. That's a perfectly legitimate way to gather things using the command line. You have your netstat command, and you use the TULPN flags on it, and you can drop it into a text file that can be used later on to see what it was that was going on. If you want to check out the ARP cache, you just do an ARP command with a -A, and it'll pull all of it, and you can dump it into a text file. Now, this can be done both locally and remotely, so that's really nice. You still need access to it, so there might be firewall issues or however it is that you need to get at it. You may need to get specific administrator. Some of these are attached to administrator capabilities. The sudo command, or I'm sorry, sudoer ability or root ability to do this. So you may have to ask for elevated privileges, and those accounts either made or given to you. But they're perfectly legitimate, and they're just as good as anything out there as far as pulling data straight off your machine. Right? And Windows has the same basic stuff. Netstat works there. You can use the set command to pull environment variables. There's a lot of things that you can do natively on the operating system. A lot of those are designed for the admin, right? The people that need that information just to operate it. But if it's the piece of information that you're looking for as part of your investigation, you can pull it and you can dump it right into a text file or another type of file as you need. Scripts are quite handy. For those of you that have used them before, you know this. In Windows, you have the batch files, batch scripts. Essentially, those are a list of those commands, some of those that I mentioned, that you could put in one file, and you can run it, and they'll do them pretty much sequentially. In the Linux world, they use bash scripts. That's the born-again shell scripts. And there's scripting languages that are made not explicitly for this, but but are very good at doing these sort of things. The Perls, the Python, and Rubies of the world are you can use these scripts and you can automate multiple steps on multiple machines, and it just makes your life that much easier. Again, you got to be careful. Right here, it mentions it. If you pull any scripts off the internet, make sure you check it. It's really easy to go, oh, some admin probably has done this before, and you'll do a search, a Google search, and somewhere in that file they may have put in something malicious. So you definitely want to be careful. You don't want to introduce anything extra when you're trying to do an investigation under these conditions. Okay, and then here are some of the GUI-based tools. Some I mentioned before, like the FTK Imager. Right? Access Data creates that. WinAudit is a free program, and that's one of those where it collects, reports information about a Windows computer in particular, so it specializes in that operating system. Mandiant has a product for collecting memory, and it's able to pare down some of that information for analysis. FResponse is actually one of those tools that offers. In particular, I think it's better known for, even though it allows you to do things locally, it's known for the remote capability of incident response. It's I don't know exactly the technology, if it kind of like if it's using tunneling or what it is, but they are known to be able to do remote collection very well.